So if you wanted evidence, the Labour Party has completely abandoned its roots. Look at who they've quoted at the bottom of this, right? It's before I go into the nitty gritty of what is on this. But if you look at the bottom quote, they've quoted the Daily Mail. Clement Attlee will be rolling in his grave. The Daily Mail in the 30s literally supported the Nazis, right? So I don't know what this is trying to say, but that shows you how far the Labour Party has gone. The Labour Party is literally quoting the Daily Mail as a legitimate source. That's quite interesting, considering the attacks they somehow still get from the Daily Mail. Don't really know why, because they're moving rightwards. The Daily Mail should start liking them more, but hey, who knows? New solar project expected to provide enough electricity to power the equivalent of 180,000 homes in a year. Yes, but you're still allowing Rosebank to go ahead. So, you know, and you think drilling in the North Sea is somehow a solution. It's not. We don't use that oil. Anything we really get from the North Sea, we export anyway. It's useless to us and it's running out, both in terms of gas and oil, whatever. The North Sea is a waste of time and money, quite frankly. So it's a bit hypocritical. You say you're doing all this solar stuff, which is good, sensible, cost effective, and provides a lot of electricity, but you also won't change the system. So although this solar power provides electricity and does good for the environment, the price that the consumer is paying is still based on the price of oil. So although it's brilliant for the environment and has that benefit, it's cheap for the government to implement, because solar panels on a mass scale aren't expensive for a government to put out, right? Hence why they're one of the best renewable sources, right? But we cannot be using renewable resources and then saying, yeah, but you're going to pay based on the price of oil, because that will mean energy companies save money, but the consumers don't. And although I think Octopus Energy has, on some instances, passed that discount on to consumers, it's only because in certain instances it actually costs them more to charge them or something. Some bureaucratic thing. But yeah, that cost isn't going to that is not going to the consumer. The person buying this electricity is not seeing the discount. That's why inequality and cost of living is directly tied to renewable resources. Not because it's taking so much money for the government to spend on it in net zero. That's not the reason. The right will tell you that that's not true. The actual issue here is that even renewable electricity is priced based on oil, and that needs to change. Rolls-Royce was a British-owned company. I don't know if it is anymore. It was nationalised, I think, at one point. Rolls-Royce. I could be wrong, correct me if I am. But they have been rather controversial, so I don't know if we should be bum-chumming with Rolls-Royce. But hey, I don't know enough about that to give a full-on in-depth explanation. But why are Rolls-Royce, a car manufacturer, being involved in building a mini nuclear reactor? Nuclear reactors, while nuclear is good and it is better than oil, it is not completely renewable. It does have an environmental impact. Minimal, better, but not ideal, right? So I'm not against nuclear, and neither are the Greens, but there are better ways of doing it, because nuclear isn't exactly efficient. It costs a lot of money to build, it takes a long time to build it, and the product it produces is not enough en masse, right? Unless you have loads and loads of them, and we don't have many in this country, and we missed the time to build loads like France made the time for, right? So we need other sources, hydroelectric, dams, etc., right? We are an island, we are surrounded by coast. That's a load of energy that we are not utilising, that we can convert to electricity or whatever it is, right? That's not being used, and that's quite easily accessible for us. And then you've got the hydroelectric generators and stuff like that, right? We're not using that, and that's quite easily accessible, right? And the government could quite easily invest in that, as other countries have done. So while nuclear is good, I don't think Rolls-Royce should be building it, and it should be completely government done and owned. And it's not enough. Nuclear is not enough until we harness nuclear fusion en masse. We can harness nuclear fusion, but we do not have the sufficient technologies, I don't think any country does, to fully harness nuclear fusion and mass use it across a country. The science isn't there yet. And until it is, we use nuclear fission. And that has some bad effects in the environment. They are somewhat minimal, and they are way better than oil and fossil fuels. So while nuclear is good, there are better things. So I'm not anti-nuclear. I think it's better than not having it, but I do think there are other things that we should invest in more. And I think that's what the Greens are trying to say, but no one's really listening. So there are critiques to give in relation to that. And while I don't dispute Labour are making moves on renewable, even feeling a lot of attack, they are still investing in oil as well. So, you know, I can't take everything they say at face value. They've done some good things, but there are some things they are doing wrong. And that's what the Greens are trying to say, but no one's really listening. And blocking tens of thousands of homes, right? There is a reason they have been blocking these, and these are individual ones in individual areas with individual contexts. So if the government is saying it's building affordable housing, working with private companies and making sure that they have a certain number of social housing is not affordable housing, right? Council houses, government owned and government run, are affordable housing, and that's what the percentage should be of these developments that go to council housing, but they go to social housing, which means private companies can run them for a profit. So they often charge slightly higher rents to remain competitive. We need to mass build council houses. That needs to be the priority. And if we're getting developers to build affordable housing, it needs to be affordable for the first time buyer. Because we have a massive issue with people, young people, up to the age of 30, sometimes even above 30, being able to afford a house on a sensible income. I'm just below, well, it depends on which figure you use. Some say that the median, once you get rid of the outliers who have way too much money, is around 32,000. And when you take London out of the equation, if you don't take those things out, it's around 37. I'm in between those two figures. So back in the day, I would have been able to get a mortgage. You'd be able to get a mortgage on one person's salary, right? Proportionally what I earn now in real terms back then, which would obviously be a lower amount, but in real terms be worth the same, right? I would be able to afford a mortgage. I can't do that now. And I've done everything I was supposed to do. Got my degree, did relatively well at school. I'm not going to say I was A-stars across the board, but I did significantly well, possibly just above average, you know, did quite well in some subjects and did okay in others. I never really did bad in anything. Just some I did better than others, right? But I got good grades, got into uni quite easily, and, you know, bloody blah, did well at uni as well. But yeah, the problem is Labour, Tories, Reform, they just put out these crazy headlines, these crazy statements. But what the Greens do is we critique the data, we look at the nuance of the debate. We don't just give blanket statements of blanket numbers and confuse the general populace. That's dishonest. We actually explain our point of view, we use data, and we explain the nuance of individual situations. The problem is the left have overly relied on that in the past. They don't tell a story like the other parties, which is they've learnt, and that's why they're growing now. But we've always been looking at the statistics to justify what we're saying, but we heavily rely on those in the arguments. We don't just throw out figures and nonsense statements, which people do respond to better. So there needs to be a balance between storytelling, understanding people, as well as giving them trustworthy information and not misleading them. That's a balance that needs to be done. The Greens are understanding that. Didn't before. We heavily relied on statistics and nuance, or we didn't really approach people enough. So we were always relatively well respected, but we didn't have a huge growing platform. But yeah, either way, Labour are being incredibly dishonest here. They're ignoring the nuance of the situation. While some housing developments that they are supporting are good, some of them really aren't, because they won't entail any affordable housing for what is actually affordable. Because what a property developer tells you is affordable isn't necessarily affordable. I don't know if the Labour Party struggled to understand this, as well as the fact social housing and council housing are not the same thing.